10 tonight. Tomorrow, cloud increasing with occasional rain developing in the evening. Northwesterlies in the afternoon, a high of 22, low 14. Right now, it is 14 degrees.
Talk back with Chris Hipkins on Kerre Woodham Mornings with pinnaclelife.co.nz. Easy online life insurance. Call 0800 80 1080. Newstalk ZB.
Newstalk ZB, it is 7 minutes past 10, bang on time. Chris Hipkins, the Labour leader and former Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, is in studio. Just over 5 months since the 2023 election, where Labour came crashing down and every other party went up. So what are you going to do to rebuild the party? Yeah, look, I mean, 5 months on from the election, a lot has happened in that period of time. And I think one of the things that we needed to do was take some time to reflect and, take stock. We were in government for 6 years. There's plenty of things that I'm proud of, but there's also plenty of things where you look back and you think, okay, if we were going to do that again, would we do that differently? And the answer, and a lot of those, to those questions is yes. So now we've got the opportunity to take stock and say, well, okay, what do we want to offer next election? What are the things that we're going to go out there and campaign on next election? And they'll be different from the previous election. They'll have to be, obviously. We lost the last one. So lost badly. It was a resounding rejection of... I don't think it was a rejection, like Jan Tonetti said, we didn't do a good job of selling our values. I just think you didn't do a good job. Your values were fine. It was the implementation that was so poor. And that's not just me railing. That's the Auditor General. That is various commissions that have looked at ways that a lot of policies were implemented, and they were implemented badly. Although, interestingly, if you look at some of the areas where the Auditor General had the strongest criticisms, they were some of the New Zealand First-led initiatives like the Provincial Growth Fund, which, of course, are continuing with that focus under this current government. But I mean, look, I think the issue around... were all of our policies delivery ready when we came into government in 2017? The honest answer to that is no, they weren't. Well, then what the hell were you doing? I think the real lesson from that is that we've got to do a better job next go round. Well, what were you doing for all those years in opposition where you were being paid to be in opposition, to be government ready? I think the current government are experiencing many of the difficulties that we did as well. I think you can't always... You came in with a surplus. You can't always come in with delivery ready policies in the way that I think we thought you could. Auckland Light Rail and Kiwi Build were massive commitments, and the reality is they were too ambitious to do from opposition. We shouldn't have gone into the campaign promising those two things. And so I think they were undeliverable, and people were saying that throughout. Well, Light Rail is not undeliverable, no, but the way it was proposed in 2017 was undeliverable, and Kiwi Build, the 100,000 in the timeframes that they were talking about, was also undeliverable. But people were saying that before you got into government. Yeah, and so plenty of lessons to learn from that. And I'm not going to be here to defend the things that went wrong, because I think one of the things about being in opposition is you do actually have to look back on and go, okay, well, where it didn't work, let's have some honest reflection on that. It's taken a moment though, because honestly, your concession speech was more like we were amazing and you people have got it wrong. I think it reflected the mood of the election. The reality is, in the election campaign, not much of what we were saying was resonating at all. I think New Zealanders had decided it was time for a change, and I think it didn't really matter what we were campaigning on in the election campaign. That was a very difficult mood to shift. Yeah, you were probably right, but I think if some of the policies had stuck. I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying something new, especially with the big, gritty, meaty, gnarly issues like people who are very hard to reach, who are difficult to get into work, difficult to stay in rental accommodation. But what on earth did you think was going to happen when you told Kaingoora tenants that if they didn't pay their rent, they wouldn't be evicted? It blew out from 2 million to nearly 18 million of unpaid rent. Well, I think you're talking about the sustaining tenancies policy, which was actually introduced at the tail end of the last national government. Which you went in with full, of course, we endorsed gusto. That. But we endorsed that. But it didn't work. It was introduced by the last national government. We endorsed it. And one of the reasons that we endorsed it was actually when you start evicting people with nowhere to go, you actually create a whole other set of problems. You can pop them in the motel and put a family that's waiting in the motel into
And there we go. And there's your answer to the problem, or there is the problem definition. We created a generation of people who were just popping around between unstable accommodation, living on the streets, and ultimately, in many cases, crime was the answer for a lot of them. And
while you had sustaining tenancies, crime went up.
But you wouldn't. I'm not sure you could link the two policies together. But actually, part of the sustaining tenancies, and it was a national government policy. Part of it was designed to try and reduce some of these problems.
You went in there, boots and all, and made it part of the platform of Kāinga Ora, and it's worth a try. But every time we questioned whatever minister was there or the head of Kāinga Ora, they didn't have any markers to see if it was working.
Yeah, I actually think one of the things that Kāinga Ora were too slow to do in terms of the sustaining tenancies was actually relocate people. So rather than eviction, I actually think relocation should be the first port of call, because I've dealt with antisocial Kāinga Ora tenants in my own electorate. Dealt with the neighbours who have had to deal with it, and I don't think they should have to put up with that. And so I think the answer where relocation was done, and we had to push as a local MP. I had to push quite hard to make this happen. Where a troublesome tenant was relocated, in about 90% of the cases that problem goes away. It's a fresh start. They actually get things move on. So the relocation policy, which I think Kāinga Ora are too slow to use, should be used more.
And then what? What happens with the unpaid rent?
Well, ultimately, with unpaid rent, I think
$2 million to nearly 18
you have to look at the circumstances that have led to that.
No, you have to look at who picks up the bill.
Well, no, because in some cases, and again, we deal with these issues through my electorate office all the time. In some cases, it's because income-related rents have been miscalculated. There are a whole variety of reasons. And the idea that there's a lot of people with a lot of rent arrears, yes, there are a lot of people, and yes, there is a lot of rent arrears, but some of them are quite small amounts. But I've dealt with a tenant just recently in the last week who has some rent arrears, who is paying that $5 a week. Now, $5 a week, it's going to take a long time for them to pay it back. But actually, if you go through their budget, this is not someone who's living a high life. This is someone who is actually wanting to pay the debt back, but it's going to take a while because they have other commitments to meet as well.
Right. But rent is one of those forms we all do. And in a cost of living crisis, paying the mortgage, paying the rent is one of the first things you do. If you tell people it doesn't matter, they can still stay there, of course they're going to let their competing priorities for their money, supersede the rent. And how are we going to get it back? The other thing, I just don't think people like you and like a lot of the ministers understand how hard it is to generate a dollar. Well, I know how hard you work.
I certainly understand how hard it is to generate a dollar, but I also understand how hard it is for the families that we're talking about here. Some of these families are making choices between paying the rent or providing food for their children.
So are people who are working.
Absolutely. And those are very real things that New Zealand families are facing on a day-to-day basis. And for those who are on the breadline, who are on, very, very low incomes, it's a very real issue.
We know. We do know that. But by allowing rent arrears to rack up from 2 million to 18 million. Who is going to pay that?
Yeah, but ultimately the tenants will need to pay that.
Well, they won't.
But the thing is, you can enter into repayment arrangements with them. But what's the alternative? Are we going to turf them out? Because if you turf them out because they have rent arrears, where are they going to go? And what are the problems that we're going to have to deal with? My pick, Kerre, is that the problems that we would deal with if we turf them out and they become homeless will be a lot more expensive than the rent arrears that are currently owing.
You don't allow it to blow out. You have proactive people working with them so they don't get into this state. Of course, they've got all kinds of priorities on their money, as working people do. But if you let them blow it out, then they're just left with this horrible debt because they're going to let it go because they know they can stay there. If you've got people working with them, as happens with the private sector, with the not-for-profits, they don't get into nearly as much trouble.
Well, no, that's simply not true.
They work with them a whole lot more closely.
No, that's not a fair comparator, actually, because speaking to private sector landlords, they'll tell you that they write off rent more regularly than Kāinga Ora do.
I'm talking about the not-for-profits who are doing a really good job of stopping problems before they begin.
But the idea that this problem is only a Kāinga Ora problem isn't true. Those who are providing rental accommodation for low-income tenants, you speak to the private landlords, they will tell you that they are regularly writing off rentals that they know are unrecoverable. So Kāinga Ora tend less are less likely to write off rentals that are unrecoverable than a private sector tenant.
So you're saying you'd just keep it as it is, like Kāinga would just let it.
I certainly think they should be certainly think they should be proactively looking to recover the money or
not let them get into trouble in the first place, because that is a huge stress on a family when you run into debt like that.
Of course it is, but it is only one of the reasons that these families are running into debt. And bearing in mind the people who are catastrophizing about this are also the people who've just made a calculation that will actually reduce the incomes of these families. So by reducing the increases in benefits, you're actually going to make the problem worse. You're going to make it harder for these families to pay their rent.
It's like parallel train tracks, isn't it?
Well, no, it's not. It's not at all.
I have to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll discuss this. Newstalk ZB, it's 10:16.
Let your local SBA accounting team keep your tax and accounting on track. Sign up now and be in to win some great prizes. Visit sba.co.nz.
Mobile made for every moment means limitless lols, non-stop scrolling and memes on repeat. Never run out with an endless mobile plan from just $45 a month with One New Zealand. Search one.nz/endless. Speeds reduced after max speed data allowance exceeded.
Looking for a better return on your funds? Senior Trust is now offering an 8% targeted pre-tax distribution rate from 1st of April 2024. As a specialist lender to the senior living sector, the Senior Trust team has built a strong track record. Their objective is to deliver consistent, attractive returns generated from mortgage loans to senior living communities, providing much-needed funding as the sector tries to keep up with the surge in demand due to the ageing population. If you'd like to learn more about Senior Trust and the increase in the targeted pre-tax distribution rate to 8%, visit seniortrust.co.nz. Senior Trust Retirement Village Income Generator Limited is the issuer of the products. The product disclosure statement for the offer is available and can be obtained at seniortrust.co.nz.
Fine wine delivery.co.nz.
It's Jeff. We're secretly clearing a cancelled export of premium Central Otago Pinot Noir at $19.99. Its origins disguised by our trusted Incognito label. From two famous Otago vineyards, it's silky smooth with luscious black fruits. Incognito Central Otago Pinot Noir, extraordinary quality at $19.99.
Fine wine delivery.co.nz.
Neighbour, you're stocking up the firewood for winter.
Sure am. You're offering to help.
No. Sore back, But just thinking, good wall insulation keeps your home warm in winter.
Yeah? You're talking about Insulmax.
Oh, who else? Insulmax can keep your place cool in summer, warm in winter.
Big job?
No, they popped round in the morning. They were done by the afternoon. No mess, no fuss. The holes are smaller than a 10-cent piece.
Insulmax, cost-effective, easy wall insulation. Insulmax.co.nz.
G'day, Di Henwood here. The Alternative Commentary Collective are covering every single One New Zealand Warriors game this season live on Sky Sport 9.
The sweat's just glistening. I love you, Marcelo Montoya. He's put the Warriors in the lead.
Join myself and the ACC's Mad Monday team for coverage of the One New Zealand Warriors versus the Raiders this Friday from 8 p.m. Live and exclusive on Sky Sport 9. Once you tune in, you'll never go back.
Brought to you by 4 and 20 Pies.
Spend your afternoon with Cy and James.
There are some calls for there to be a cap on political donations. Donors rhymes with owners. That's the way I see it. I don't have a problem with people donating to political campaigns, but I do think there should be a limit on it. And, I think we're being naive if we think that they don't want some sort of engagement or some sort of payback for those donations.
Simon Barnett and James Daniels Afternoons. Back today from midday on Newstalk ZB.
Newstalk ZB, it is 10:20. Kerry, can you ask Chris a question for me, please, says a texter. When I employed a young lady as a qualified chef, started here on $28 an hour, 35 hours a week. She handed in her notice after about 3 months because she gets more on the benefit home with the 2 children. And I've had another woman who texted me who said she got more with all the benefits. Then she was offered a job at $86,000. It wasn't worth her to take up that job while the child was little. The 2 children were little.
I think what we have to do is I think this is a legitimate issue. This issue around is work paying? So, are people better off by going into work? And it's not just the question of how much they're being paid at at work versus on the benefit. It's also looking at all of the other things that go with that. So childcare, for example, you throw in childcare and suddenly the whole economic equation changes, because potentially you are actually better off staying at home if you're paying for full-time childcare for your children. So I do think we need to look at that, and I think we need to look at whether we can target more support to those who are in that position, so that actually we're making work pay, so that we're actually making it so that people genuinely are better off by going into it. I think it's a totally legitimate issue. One of the things that we'll be doing in the next couple of years is actually the calculations around that. So, I think we need to be quite precise about this. So we need to actually be saying, okay, if you are going into that kind of a job, where those job opportunities are there, let's weigh that up versus the benefit. Then let's calculate out what your other costs are, whether it's transport, whether it's childcare and so on, and let's actually make sure that we've got answers to how we make work pay.
And wouldn't it be better for businesses to be productive and to be making money so they can therefore pay more, so therefore it's more attractive to work? I mean, the woman who said that she turned down the $86,000 job, she understood the merits of working, but if it doesn't make financial sense. I mean, she was a bright woman. It doesn't make financial sense.
That's quite right. And we've also got to look at how we support employers to take on some of those, potential employees who might require a bit more upfront investment. So particularly if you're looking at someone who might have had a longer period on a benefit, for example, and an employer is willing to take them on, in the early phase, if that person's been out of work for a long time, the employer might actually be needing to put more support around them. They might actually need to be making sure that they're work ready. And I don't think we support that well enough. And so I think these are all areas I think we need to look at a lot more.
You've had a long time to look at the problems and
but we did,
change.
and some of the examples of things that we've done have actually worked really well. So Mana and Mahi was a program that I actually helped to set up, and it said if you're taking someone off a benefit and you're giving them an apprenticeship, then actually we'll subsidise the employer for the first period of that apprenticeship, because actually it works. And you have to develop an evidence base to show that it works. Through Mana and Mahi, we've had that in place for several years now, and the evidence base is there. It works. But actually, we also discovered that there was a gap in that. So it's not just about giving the employer a subsidy to take them on. Actually, those young employees, and in many cases we're talking about apprenticeships, so we're talking about young men who often have lots of other things going on in their lives that have been problematic. It was also about some pastoral care as well, because some of those builders, plumbers, electricians, they were saying, look, happy to teach them how to do the job, don't have time to worry about whether they're managing their budget, whether they're paying their rent, whether they're doing those other things, which for many of these young people, if it was their first job, it was the first time they were encountering all of those things. So we put in place some additional pastoral care for them as well. And that actually meant that we were sustaining people in those apprenticeships for longer. Once you get someone through an apprenticeship, actually, the odds of them cycling in and out of a benefit are much, much lower than if they drop out of their apprenticeship partway through. So it's about getting it right so that we make work pay, but also we're supporting those people who don't have a history of work to actually get into some work that they can sustain.
Well, they don't have a history of education probably, because if you're 17 or 18, and I know that's a big concern of yours, and we'll touch on that in a minute because we're right up against a break. But education, I mean, that's where the future is, and you'd have to say it's in a parlous state, and we can discuss that in a moment. Newstalk ZB 1024.
The AA Insurance Big Little sponsorship is back. Your primary school could be the next to win one of 2 10K sports grants thanks to the AA Insurance Big Little sponsorship. The joy, the gear, the game, it all starts with your nomination.
I'd buy something for everyone so we can all play together.
Nominate your primary school at aainsurance.co.nz today and help them play a little freer with our Big Little sponsorship. Proudly supported by Eden Park. T's and C's apply.
Auckland City Toyota Grey Lynn, Green Lane and Mount Wellington Superstore end the financial year sale with the widest selection of used Toyotas and a great finance deal. Get 4.9% finance on any of the 450 quality used vehicles at Auckland City Toyota. T's and C's apply. 4.9% per annum is fixed for terms up to 24 months with a 20% deposit on a credit contract from Toyota Financial Services. Establishment fee of $400 and PPSR fee of $9.20 applies. Normal lending criteria apply. Hurry, only until March 31st.
The Huddle.
With Heather Duplessis Allen Drive, weekdays at 20 to 6. It's The Huddle with New Zealand Sotheby's International Realty. Unparalleled reach to present your property locally and globally.
The Huddle.
With Heather Duplessis Allen Drive on Newstalk ZB.
Passion takes you far in business, but funding takes you further. Until March 31st, enjoy no repayments and no interest on Prosper business loans for the first 4 weeks. Visit prosper.co.nz today. T's and C's and standard credit criteria apply.
For a limited time, your partner can fly free and solo travellers save 50% off their airfare on selected Wendy Woo Tours unique itineraries. Immerse yourself on a trip of a lifetime to discover the unique traditions and cultures of Japan, Vietnam, China and beyond on one of Wendy Woo Tours' fully inclusive group departures, including international airfares. Visit wendywootours.co.nz or see your local travel professional. T's and C's apply.
Not all retirement living is the same. At Settlers Lifestyle Village, the difference is community. Sure, it has all the expected facilities, including nurses always on site. But with the Settlers Lodge at its heart, its own social, arts, hobby and recreation scenes, Settlers has a vibrant holiday resort feeling every day. Visit settlersalbany.co.nz or just call in and experience the difference for yourself. Settlers, the better side of life.
Worldwide on iHeartRadio. Kerre Woodham Mornings. Engaging conversation on Newstalk ZB.
Mike on Kerre. Newstalk ZB, it's 10:27. Education. I know that's a passion of yours. It's a passion of mine. It's something I care very deeply about. As soon as the kids miss out on any education, that so limits the choices and makes it so tough to come back from. And yet the attendance figures, however you finesse them, are bad. You know, our results are poor.
Well, we've got to look at, there's lots that we could talk about when we're talking about education.
It's always a big gnarly meaty one.
Yeah, of course it is. But let's start with attendance. I think we need to be clear about the problem definition. And the problem here is the kids who are chronically absent from school. It isn't the kids whose parents take them on an overseas holiday or who have long weekends periodically from time to time, because there's a teacher-only day on the Thursday, so the parents say, right, we're going to take the kids out of school on the Friday. And that's where the current attendance measure that we refer to is actually a bit problematic. Because
but you were concerned about it as Minister of Education.
But I was more concerned about the kids who were attending chronically absent.
Yes.
So the 90% attendance measure, let's give you the practical example of what we encountered last year. If kids took a week off because they had COVID and then their parents took a long weekend, because there was a teacher-only day or whatever, the kids didn't meet the 90% measure. And actually, there's a lot of kids who didn't meet the 90% attendance measure but were actually in the 80 to 90% range because of exactly those kind of things. Frankly, they were not the group of kids that I was lying in bed at night worried about. The group that I'm more worried about, and it's a much smaller group, because it's still numbers in the thousands of kids, but we're kind of talking single thousands figures rather than tens of thousands. It's that group of kids who are just not showing up.
Yeah, but
we
know who the problem is. Everybody has successive. Bill English, Tariana Turia's social investment policy knew that it was a small group and they cause major problems.
Yeah, and I think we've got to
they have major problems.
Yeah, and I actually think we do need to recognise that for some of those kids, school's not going to be the answer to the question. And no Minister of Education's ever liked to front up and say that. But I'll tell you, having had 5 years of experience of looking at this, I think we've got to be honest about some of the alternatives here. Alternative education in New Zealand and activity centres have a mixed bag of performance. Some of them do outstandingly well, and some of them are absolutely abysmal. Apprenticeships. For some of those kids, getting onto the job, doing things that are practical with their hands, where they can see the purpose of their learning, that's going to engage them far more than sitting in a classroom.
But we're talking about 3, 4, 5-year-olds.
Well, for the young kids, then we've got to deal with the social dysfunction that sits underneath that, because
that's right.
No school's ever going to be able to go out there and drag every kid to school in the morning. And I think expecting principals to do that's unreasonable.
No, but
we've got to deal with the fact that
can't
some
we do measures like, when we talk about the rent arrears, okay, you're behind in your rent, but you're sending your children to school every day. You're making a real effort because you've got a home now, somewhere you can call your own. You can send the kids to the local school. Okay, so we take some of that off your rent because you're doing a good job getting your kids to school.
I'm all for a much more kind of holistic wraparound type approach to those families.
And you've had all the time and money to do that.
But we have had some examples of where that's worked quite well. I mean, Whānau Ora, which was established under National, continued under us, has some good examples of where this has actually worked. I think we should be looking to learn from those and expand those models that actually work.
Yes.
Because it is about saying, one of the frustrations of government, and you'll hear ministers from successive governments, whether they're Labour or National, complaining about this, is that far too much of what government does is done in silos. So you'll deal with housing and you'll deal with rent arrears just in terms of dealing with rent arrears. What you've done is just connect that with another problem, which is around attendance, connect that with another problem, which is around healthcare, for example, and not being able to access healthcare. You start joining the dots together, we're going to get a much better outcome than if we just obsess about one problem or another.
But that's what Bill English and Tariana Turia were talking about, that all of that research was there. And you had the opportunity to...
No, actually, and a lot of the stuff that Bill English started with the Social Investment Agency continued under our government. So, I don't accept that there's necessarily been a change in approach there.
Thank you. We're going to headlines. You're very welcome to call 0800 80 1080. I can keep talking to the leader of, we can have a conversation through until 11 o'clock. But if you would like to have a conversation, we will move on to what you will do differently for Labour as well, not just looking back. Newstalk ZB 1031.
Newstalk ZB Auckland. Time saver
Auckland
traffic.
City Toyota March mega stock sale. Good morning. Now the Southern Motorway moderate to heavy coming in Ellerslie through to Green Lane. The Northwestern moderate to heavy from St Luke's. The Northern northbound moderate over the Harbour Bridge. Citybound and moderate patch at Upper Harbour again from Esmond. Auckland City Toyota March mega stock sale. Shop New Zealand's largest selection of used Toyotas. Time saver traffic.
Don't miss the grand reopening at Still Shop Onehunga, open all day this Saturday. To celebrate, get up to 45% off selected equipment while stocks last with no rain checks. Plus, if you buy anything in store on the day, you'll go in the draw to win a new barbecue. Sausage sizzle, activities, giveaways, prizes. It's all happening at the Still Shop grand reopening all day this Saturday. They've moved to 270 Church Street, Onehunga, with entrance and parking off Maze Road. Still Shop, love your land.
The OMG Factory Bonus Sale is now on. Take $1,000 off the MG3, ZS and ZST, and $3,000 off the HS and HS plug-in hybrid. Visit your MG dealer today to find out more. Hurry, offer ends soon. T's and C's apply.
Calling all furniture buyers. Don't miss Danske Møbler's huge stock take sellout. Spectacular savings on quality furniture store-wide. Up to 50% off. Plus hot buys and price to clear. At Danske Møbler, furniture for living.
Last week at Magnus Benroe, we did a special on a 50-inch Panasonic TV.
The price was so good, it totally sold out.
So this week we're going even bigger.
Much bigger.
Get the Panasonic 75-inch 4K smart TV.
Huge screen, mint sound, all the smart bits.
Originally $3,000, this week only $1,479.
You've heard right, a 75-inch 4K smart TV for just $1,479.
While stocks last, when they're gone, they're gone.
Don't be a sad sack and miss out.
100% Magnus Benroe.
Riddle me this. When is a savings account not a savings account, but still kind of a savings account? When it's the Nico AM Cash Fund from GoalsGetter, of course. It's a really smart alternative to the bank with 5.9% expected returns and the flexibility to withdraw funds with just 2 days' notice. Pretty onto it, eh? Check out this and other expert tips at goalsgetter.co.nz. Like now. The Nico AM Cash Fund is offered by Nico Asset Management New Zealand Limited. Please read the product disclosure statement at goalsgetter.co.nz. Returns may vary over time.
Newstalk ZB headlines.
With Blue Bubble taxis, it's no trouble with a blue bubble. The Commerce Commission says the personal banking sector lacks competition, with the Big Four, ANZ, ASB, BNZ and Westpac, holding the advantage and focusing on profit. Dairy giant Fonterra has announced a 23% increase in reported earnings, with its interim dividend up from 10 cents a share to 15. The Transport Accident Investigation Commission says short staffing is to blame for a miscommunication last May, which meant Kiwi Rail workers in a Wellington tunnel had a near miss with a train. A Tauranga City Council report shows only 29 units received building consents in January, compared with an expected average of nearly 100 a month. Up to $70,000 drought support's on the way for Canterbury and Otago as they join Marlborough, Nelson and Tasman districts in being classified as undergoing a medium-scale adverse event. Featherston residents are still waiting for town welcome signs to replace ones removed in 2020. Discussion continues on how to make them safer for motorists. Eddie Jones says, don't blame me for Wallaby's budget blowout. Read this and more from Sports Insider at NZ Herald Premium. Back to Kerre Woodham.
Malcolm, thank you. It is 24 minutes to 11. Chris Hipkins, Labour leader and former Prime Minister, is in the studio. Susan, you have a question for Chris Hipkins.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning.
In 2017, against my better judgment, I did vote for Labour because Jacinda was campaigning all for kindness and homelessness and child poverty, etc. 6 years later, every statistic was far, far worse. And I, quite frankly, couldn't wait to get rid of you guys at the last election. So what went wrong? How long did it take? It was always, national, whatever. There was every excuse under the sun, and I don't feel that you have addressed the actual reason why people didn't vote for you.
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that, some of those indicators did get worse during the time that we were in government, including the number of people waiting for public homes, for example. And we could not build public homes fast enough to meet the needs of the number of people on the waiting list. And, we built over 10,000 new additional state houses, public homes.
Excuse me, I don't think you're being accountable. And as far as the whole race division thing went, I think you guys promoted this whole racist agenda. We are all one people. You couldn't even say what a woman was. I mean, you went wrong in so many areas, and I think you really need to sit back and reflect on this and address how the public saw you and your government.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of defining what a woman is, if you want a Prime Minister who will use that as an opportunity to attack the transgender community in front of a whole nationwide audience, then that's not going to be me, because that's just not something that I'm interested in doing. But I accept that there are problems facing the country that are going to require better solutions to the ones that we've come up with. The homelessness problem is absolutely one of those.
I think Simon Wilson put it, thank you, Susan, I think, and he's not to the right of Attila the Hun, Simon Wilson. He's a friend of Labour. Part of the reason everything became such a hard sell is Labour also forgot the importance of short-term solutions. Long-term planning, big projects are important. Getting things done now is too. Build light rail, okay. First make the existing bus networks highly functional. Restructure water services, but get those safety filters in place for the water we're drinking now. Reform education, of course, but get kids back into classrooms. Don't wreck the universities or the technical institutes, and yes, reform the health system. The priority has to be on the front line.
I think that's absolutely fair, and I think that some of the stuff that we were doing was very long-term focused, and we didn't focus enough on the short-term quick fixes in the meantime. But I think we've also got to accept as a country over the last 30 or 40 years, quick fixes are all we've done in a lot of these problem areas, and it is time for us to start taking some of the longer-term solutions far more seriously.
But you didn't prove you could. Like there didn't seem to be checks and balances, and is this working, or do we need to tweak this? Do we need to? I don't actually accept that as a criticism across the board. I do think that there's legitimate criticism of that in some areas, and I've mentioned a couple of them. Kiwi Build, Auckland Light Rail. I think those are big long-term projects where we didn't get quick wins, and we'll wear that criticism. In other areas, State House building, for example, we built more than 10,000 new public homes during the 6 years that we were in government. That's the fastest public home building record of any government in New Zealand's almost living memory, certainly since about the 1960s. And so, it's, I think, blanket across the board judgments are somewhat unfair. Richard, a question from you.
Good morning, Mr. Hipkins, Kerry.
Morning.
Doing well there?
Morning.
Look, just my question here is, my son's just started an apprenticeship, and it's his dream job. He's always wanted to do this, and his wage is $18 an hour for an apprentice. Now, how someone can survive on $18 an hour and run a car or those sorts of things, when probably on the benefit he's going to get a lot more than that, but he doesn't want to be on a benefit. Is there anything in the future where this could be supported a lot better by government to keep these young fellas in apprenticeships?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a fantastic question, and it's an issue that I'm really passionate about. As Minister of Education, we introduced the Apprenticeship Boost, which is effectively a wage subsidy for employers who take on an apprentice in the first 18 months of their apprenticeship. It gives the employer a wage subsidy, which means that not only are they more likely to take on an apprentice, but actually they can pay them better than if they were just having to do that for themselves. We funded that as a COVID initiative because we were worried that all the apprentices were going to get laid off during COVID. It was so successful we extended it for another year and a half. The funding for that, I think, runs out at the end of this year, and I hope that the current government will pick it up as an example of an initiative that's successful, that actually delivers a long-term payoff, because I think increased government spending on things like apprenticeships, where you know it's going to deliver a good outcome, is totally justifiable in the current economic context. So that's just one example. I think we need to look at others. But the starting out wage idea, where you're basically saying that someone who's just coming into the workforce can be paid less than the minimum wage. While I understand the logic behind that, I also accept that for someone like your son, it actually makes it hard to live on and therefore hard to sustain, their first job. And we've got to look at how we can do better there.
Thank you very much. Newstalk ZB 18 to 11.
Restoring the roof on your house. The Coalfire guys know you want it done once, done right, and once they're finished, you don't want to see them again. That's why Coalfire gives a 12-year warranty, so you won't have to see them again for a long, long time. It all comes from doing a good job with quality materials at a fair price and standing by their work. Not actually standing by it, you actually want them to leave. Visit coalfireroofs.co.nz.
Call the Coalfire guys. Call the Coalfire guys.
Hi, my name's Matt. Talk about how things can go from good to bad. I bought a little Italian greyhound. His name was Minnie. Everything was sweet. 6 months later, he broke his leg. The vet bill was $6,500. Luckily, I had pet insurance with Pet Insure. They picked up the bill. It was absolute genius. If you've got a pet, I strongly advise you to get pet insurance with Pet Insure.
Phone Pet Insure. 0800 367 444.
Tradies, now's your chance to trade up with thousands of dollars off a huge range of vans. Trade-ins welcome. Check citymotorgroup.co.nz. Don't miss the biggest van sale on now at citymotorgroup.co.nz.
My laundry is leaking and flooding. My washers are starting to wear. My drains are blocked up and bursting. My spouting needs urgent repair.
Phone our number 0800 Mr. Plumber. Phone our number 0800 Mr. Plumber.
Soak up the savings with Hot Spring Spas. Right now, the world's #1 selling spa pool is on sale. Hundreds of models must clear. From premium saltwater spas right through to the value range. New spas, display stock, showroom demo models, refurbished spas and more, all priced to clear. Deals are based on local stock. Don't miss your chance to climb into the world's best selling spa pool now. Visit Hot Spring Spas Auckland, Botany or Newmarket today for access to exclusive deals and soak up the savings.
Get set, Warriors fans! Go Media Stadium Mount Smart comes alive again on Sunday, March 31st, with your One New Zealand Warriors hosting the Newcastle Knights for round 4 of the 2024 NRL Premiership campaign. With adult tickets from just $20 and free general admission entry for kids under 15, seats are selling fast. So head to Ticketmaster now to get yours. Let's pack the fortress on Easter Sunday and get behind your One New Zealand Warriors in season 2024.
Chris Hipkins taking your calls on 0800 80 1080 on Kerre Woodham Mornings with Pinnacle Life. Get a life insurance quote in just 30 seconds. Newstalk ZB.
And we jolly well will talk about it. We're just talking about the school lunches. If you cared that much about the school lunches, why didn't you fund them out of the budget and from either education or health rather than dip into the COVID fund?
The COVID fund was how we started the funding, and then we actually put funding in last year's budget to continue the program on because it had been successful. And we made the commitment in the election and in our plan going into the election that we would fund them on an ongoing basis. It was actually set up as a COVID initiative because it was one of those things to support families through that period of time. But actually it was successful and we want to continue it. So yes, we would have funded it on a long-term basis out of the education budget.
Right, you would have. Yeah. You would have found the money from somewhere.
Well, no, we had it in our plan. Budgets always have limitations in terms of the funding. Your fiscal plan before the election sets out what of the things that are time limited you want to continue. We'd set out that we were going to continue that one.
I was talking to a principal of one of the poorest schools in the country. You know, these are very low decile, and they welcomed it, but Why could we not? Why did we have to over-egg the omelette, almost literally, and have quinoa and Israeli couscous and baked pumpkin in for kids who'd never take? What's wrong with a sandwich, an apple, a yogurt and a sweet treat?
So actually the schools can determine the menu.
Yeah, but there are health department guidelines as well that they had to follow.
But actually,
and money was given to... shut up.
Because I had the same question, and it's a really fair one. I mean, I make my kids' lunch boxes, right? And so I know what they'll eat, I know what they won't. And I can tell you that if 90% of the food gets eaten on any given day, and they come home having eaten that, I'm delighted. That's a great day. But schools can choose the menu, and so there are some things. For example, pita pit. Now, pita pit's pretty good food. You generally will get kids eating it. It's also quite healthy, so it meets the guidelines. So some schools will contract pita pit for 1 or 2 days a week as part of their menu options. Other schools are doing things like that. You know, it's about portion control. So they might do fried chicken, for example, but it's a question of what you put with the fried chicken. So schools have actually got that flexibility. It's more, yes, those quinoa, I mean, I don't like the stuff, but anyway, those are options, but they don't have to do that.
Are we taking a break and then going to our callers for a quick fire wraparound of our questions for our callers? Newstalk ZB 14 to 11.
What is that?
Brass Monkey portable fridge freezer.
But where's the ice?
No ice.
No ice.
No ice. The No Ice Brass Monkey portable fridge freezer Easter sale with up to 40% off is now on. Available at JCar stores nationwide.
Going electric? Continental Cars has a wide range of electric and hybrid vehicles and the answers to all your questions with fully trained technicians to keep your wheels safely turning. View the range at continentalcars.co.nz. Continental Cars, driving excellence.
Wardrobe Warehouse, we get you sorted.
You're renovating. Time to sort the bedrooms and get the sort of wardrobe that not only looks good but sorts out all your storage. Talk to the good sorts at Wardrobe Warehouse on Springs Road, East Tamaki. Wardrobe Warehouse. Life sorted.
We're making big changes at Auckland Airport, building an airport to transform your travel experience. If you're heading to the airport, please plan ahead and allow extra time. Visit lookingbeyond.co.nz to find out more.
Not all retirement living is the same. At Settlers Lifestyle Village, the difference is community.
At Settlers Lifestyle Village, the focus is on residents and the vitality of life. With a wide range of resident-led activities, from yoga to darts, line dancing to table tennis, you'll find your fit and fitness. That's why 10 years ago, Precious McKenzie chose Settlers Lifestyle Village as the place to call home. And that's why he recommends it to others.
Settlers, the better side of life.
Saturday afternoon, it's the Weekend Collectors One Roof radio show with Conroy Removals, celebrating 50 years and always moving with the times, with property market trends, leading insights and more. It's the One Roof radio show with Conroy Removals, Saturday from 4 on Newstalk ZB.
Enjoy a new level of luxury at Beds R Us with 50% off Sleepyhead Sanctuary. Our most luxurious sleep, handcrafted with the finest materials and half price for a limited time. Only at Beds R Us, where dreams begin.
We've found a way to help New Zealand businesses transition to a low-carbon future with a low-cost rate. At 5.5% per annum fixed for up to 5 years, BNZ's Green Asset Finance Loan can enable your business to be more efficient and sustainable. Chat to one of BNZ's specialist business partners to find a greener way to help your business grow. Visit bnz.co.nz/Green Asset Finance to find out more. Bank of New Zealand, let's find a way. Available for amounts up to $500,000. Lending criteria, T's and C's apply.
This is Newstalk ZB Breaking News.
Well, is it breaking? I think we were all kind of expecting it, really. New Zealand's entered a technical recession. Congratulations. That's on you.
Well, no, that's on the current government. They're in charge now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Graham, a very good morning.
Yes, good morning, Kerry, and to Chris Hipkins. My question is on wealth taxes. Is Labor going to implement them in the next election as an agenda? I know you were against it in the last election, which is a good thing. I mean, people that don't necessarily accumulate wealth through savings, and middle income New Zealanders. What's your policy going forward for the next election?
We've said that we're going to have a good look at our tax policy before the election, before we make any announcements on that. I think the sorts of concerns that you have just raised, though, are concerns that I have. I don't want to penalise people for doing the right thing. And, there's good wealth. People who are investing wealth in a business that's productive business, that's making stuff, that's employing people. We also don't want to necessarily punish people for doing that. But we've got it. Well, we don't want to punish people for doing that. But we also have to accept that our tax system, relative to others around the world, actually puts a lot of weight on the workers to pay the lion's share of tax. And we don't tax in New Zealand in any way comparable to other countries people who are making money off returns on wealth. That is an inequity in our tax system that actually stands us apart from people we compare ourselves to, the US, the UK, Australia, and we actually should have a conversation as a country about that.
Surely you'd support shifting the tax rates, given that the minimum wage is now getting to about median wage.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question of timing, whether now is the right time to do that, given the current economic cycle that we're in. But in time, periodically from time to time, I think there does need to be an adjustment of tax brackets.
Isn't it? You should have really done it, probably. I mean, I know everyone loves talking about national giving tax cuts. What they're talking about is shifting the income tax rates.
Yeah, I mean, they were last adjusted in 2010 periodically from time to time. But I mean, that National were in government for 7 years after that. Yeah. So they didn't adjust them during that time either. In fact, they had 7 years, we had 6. So the reality here is from time to time there needs to be an adjustment. Whether now is the right time to do that, when the economy is in the state that it's in, and tax adjustments, tax cuts, actually are inflationary.
Yeah, but it's shifting the income tax rates.
But all of that is inflationary as well. So we actually need to get inflation down, because what people are likely to benefit from the modest adjustments to tax brackets that this will make versus what they will pay if inflation stays higher for longer, they're likely to be more disadvantaged by higher inflation than they would be advantaged by the tax cut.
Yes, that's a whole other hour, really. It is 7 minutes to 11. Oh, yay, good. Okay, we've got time. Mike, good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Good.
As I came to New Zealand in 2014, and I emigrated here, I started a business and I employ 150 people by 2024. And as a taxpayer, I've got to be honest, I was never that impressed with Labour's job on what they spent the money on. But the question is this: why did we give so much airspace and money to the gangs? Why didn't we come down? Why didn't Labour come down a lot harder on the gangs than they did? What was the story behind that?
Yeah, look, I've got no time for the gangs. I think they are a blight on society. The programs that you're talking about, though, where the gangs received money from government were drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs. Some of those actually had started under the previous national government, and they actually were delivering the results. So they were successful drug and alcohol rehab programs run by people who were currently involved in gangs. Frankly, when it comes to drug and alcohol rehab, I'll go for programs that work. And, the fact that there were people who were previously associated, either currently or previously associated with gangs involved in them, meant that I wasn't willing to turn the tap off on those just because of that. Of course, if we can find ways to do that better, which doesn't have that, the current gang members associated with it, then I'd be open to that as well. But
the thing is, Chris, the gangs have got bigger. One of my offices is in Takanini, and they drive past the office on their back wheels on motocross bikes, patched up, and they don't care. I'm not 100% certain what you've done other than create a much bigger monster just by being soft with them.
Yeah, look, I agree with your concern about the bigger gang members and the motorcycle convoys. As my brief tenure as Minister of Police, sponsored a law change through the Parliament to actually give the police greater powers to confiscate motorbikes, to confiscate cash, and to really kind of go after the gangs, because I think that sort of intimidation that we're seeing isn't really acceptable. The main debate in Parliament at the moment is around whether gang patches should be banned or not. Actually, if you talk to the police aren't in favour of that law change, because it's actually going to make their job harder. It'll make it harder for them to see the gangs, but it'll also put them potentially in a position where it's going to be very hard for them to enforce the law. And so the police aren't in favour of it. But I actually do think that further law changes to give police more tools to crack down on illegal gang activity, I'm all up for conversations about that.
But I think it's more perception that Mike was talking about, that policing by consent, that all the way through when people couldn't grieve for people they'd lost when all the COVID restrictions were in place, they didn't seem to apply to the gangs, and that was okay because they were reaching hard to reach people.
Policing by consent is a very misunderstood term. It involves policing with the consent of the entire population. So it basically means that a police force shouldn't. We don't live in a brutal dictatorship. A police force shouldn't rule by brute strength. A police force should rule because the goodwill of the public allows them to do their job. That doesn't mean that everybody who the police are policing is going to agree with the decisions that they're taking. In fact, the police have to do the opposite. In many cases, they've got to go in and be quite hard on people who are going to disagree with that and not be happy with it.
Have you enjoyed yourself?
I always love. I love politics. I love being able to talk about politics, and a good argument is a good day.
And at least we're talking. We're not doing vile emails and nasty social media, and we can agree to disagree and still have a discussion and still wish each other well, and I think more of that.
Yeah, and I certainly hope that we can do more of that. Look, it's been a pretty brutal period for the country, and in terms of just the vitriol that we've seen in our political discourse, and I hope that now we're moving past that.
Who's this for? Oasis. Love a bit of Oasis. Don't look back in anger.
I was asked what alternative song Winston Peters could have entered his conference to, and I reckon Don't Look Back in Anger would be a good motto for him at the moment.
That was provocative. Oasis and Don't Look Back in Anger will take us through to the news at 11.